Dipti is here as well with the international papers. And Dipti, you're talking about this story we were talking about with Maeve McMahon earlier on in Brussels. This stern rebuke expected to come from the European Union to Poland today.
That's right, a rebuke in the form of Article 7 that the EU is expected to trigger this Wednesday against Poland. Now, the two sides have sort of been warring for the past 2 years over Poland's judicial reforms, which the EU says which the EU fears is really a symbol of growing authoritarianism and a strike down of democratic laws in Poland. Article 7 is essentially a political warning, and it could trigger things like a loss of voting rights for the Polish within the bloc. That's what the Financial Times is explaining.
So how's the press been reacting then?
Well, we've been looking at some of the Polish press, which hasn't been super reactive on the issue, but the British paper, The Economist, has been reacting to it with this cartoon that you see from the paper. Think of it as a sort of Christmas gift, if you like, from Merkel and Angela Merkel and Emmanuel Macron, who are kind of spearheading this article to Poland, and there is its leader, the leader of its Law and Justice Party, Jarosław Kaczynski. The Economist says there's really no good way for the EU to deal with this. The problem here is that if you simply trigger Article 7, well, then that's seen as a rap on the knuckles. If Poland is stripped of their rights, well, the EU would need unanimity from other members in order for it to pass, and Hungary has already said it would veto it. So essentially, for the writer, the EU risks looking, quote, imperialist in aspiration and impotent in action. There is one Polish paper that has reacted, one opinion piece slamming the decision, saying it doesn't look good for the EU to sanction Poland, and lamenting the fact that there are no EU leaders really left to defend Poland and its interests apart from Viktor Orban.
Dipti's also been looking at reactions to that missile attack by Iran-backed Houthi rebels in the Saudi capital of Riyadh.
Well, that was a pretty brazen attack targeting the Saudi crown prince from the Houthi rebels into Riyadh, the missile was struck down by Saudi authorities. Now, the Washington Examiner, which is a conservative American paper, slams Iran for risking war just to test the Saudi crown prince, likening this strike to something straight out of the, quote, Iranian Revolutionary Guard's textbook. There's another piece from a pan-Arab London-based paper, Al Arab, which is really scathing towards the Houthis, who are, of course, backed by Iran. The writer is saying it shows the rebels have a real political bankruptcy, I'm quoting there. And finally, you have a Saudi paper, Al Awsat, which takes aim at the UN and its, quote, misguided approach in dealing with Yemen. The writer argues that by reducing Yemen to a humanitarian issue, well, we're overlooking the huge political problem that is the rebel group, the Houthis, which the writer calls a terrorist group.
Now, the French newspaper Le Figaro, you found a piece in that, haven't you? Indeed, focusing on the humanitarian crisis, Yemen, entering its 1,000th day of war.
Well, the conflict began in March 2015, so today does mark 1,000 days since it began, and it's a pretty grim record. If you look at this article from Le Figaro, 10,000 people have died. The war has sparked the worst cholera epidemic in the country ever. Famine is affecting 70% of Yemen's 30 million people, and according to NGOs, 10 million people need emergency care, including numerous children.
Medical news now. An extraordinary story, this, about a frozen embryo. Tell us more.
Well, 25-year-old Tina Gibson in the States has just given birth to her first child. Now, she used a frozen embryo from the U.S.'s National Embryo Donation Center. She was shocked to discover that the embryo has been frozen since 1992, meaning scientifically her child was conceived a year after she herself was born.
Wow.
It set a new record for the oldest frozen embryo, leading to a successful birth. As they say, a real medical marvel.
That is amazing, isn't it? And finally, I read this story earlier, Dipti, but I haven't seen a picture yet, so I'm looking forward to it. There's going to be no Christmas miracle, apparently, for the Italian capital, Rome. The city's tree has been declared dead, and it's made residents furious.
That's right. It's got all the trappings of sort of like an Italian mafia story, this one. There's no Christmas cheer in Rome, that's for sure. The city's 50,000 euro Christmas tree has been named Spellaccio because in Italian that means balding and mangi, which is exactly how people have described the tree, which was put up in the city centre. One user on Twitter has likened it to a toilet brush, in fact, and there's a great tweet where you see there you go. Preliminary Preliminary investigation suggests a 20-meter tree was perhaps sabotaged on its way from an Austrian forest. Some say it's actually a metaphor for the decaying state of the city that and Mayor Virginia Raggi has come under fire for trash piling up, unfixed potholes, and just the general decaying state of Rome. Now, there's actually a brand of men's hair products that got into the action promoting its products so men don't end up like Spellaccio, the tree.
Imagine what it's going to look like in a few weeks or a month's time.
Oh, I think it'll be buried in a few weeks.
Yeah, exactly.
Worth noting also that Rome was the unfortunate recipient of last year's Christmas tree dubbed the austerity tree and named the ugliest tree in the world.
Oh, dear. There's nothing wrong with balding, by the way, Dipsy.
Only on trees.
Making that clear.